If you,
Okay, let's begin with the word of prayer.
okay,
Dear Father in heaven, thank you for this day, for all your blessings. And we ask for your Holy Spirit to be here as we look at the Metonic cycle, and as we try to understand its significance prophetically. Thank you for hearing our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Yeah, so you were going to say something there.
okay. What you're showing here is what I had put on the second page of the spreadsheet notebook.
Yeah, doing it in this sort of yours was going up and down, right?
Right.
Okay, yeah, I saw that. But I just want to do this way.
Sure.
Now, so this is a 19-year cycle. And what you're going to have is you're going to have some years are going to be what we call normal years. So just to explain the Metonic cycle for somebody seeing this presentation without all of the background information.
Okay.
So, okay, you have a comment?
Well, go ahead.
So the Jews use a lunar-solar calendar. That is, they count the months, and every 12 months you have a year. But since 12 months are roughly 29 and a half days long, you could see that you're going to fall short of a solar year by about 10 days, 10 or 11 days. So it's really 354 and a third days in 12 months. So that means they're going to have to add an extra month to line up with the solar year. Now, the Islamic calendar, the one that it's been in use since 600 and some, and it actually existed before that, but the Islamic calendar comes from 622 AD. They don't add the extra month, and that's why Muslims, when they celebrate Ramadan, every year it's going to be about 11 days earlier, and it's just going to continue always being 11 days earlier. So they come around a whole cycle about 33 and a half years, then they come around and line up again with the solar year. So it's kind of an odd thing. They don't have their, be like having Christmas 11 days earlier every year, and then, every 32 and a half years, you'd end up with Christmas at Christmas time in the winter again. So that's how their calendar works. But the Jews, what they do is they add an embolism, or a 13th month, a leap month, every 2 or 3 years. So if you were going to look at a cycle like this, so here I have 19 years lined up, and this cycle happens to work in this way. So if this is then a leap year, the next 2 years will be normal years, and then this year will be a leap year. And then the next 2 years will be normal years, and this year a leap year. Now, of course, it depends where I start in the cycle. But this one's very convenient because it works like a musical scale. I would start with the first year, and then the fourth year of the cycle would be like a whole tone, like from C to D, and then D to E. And then I would have a semitone. So they're going to have 2 years and then a leap year. And then you're going to have 3 years in a leap year, 3 years in a leap year, and then 3 years and a leap year. And then, of course, you would start again on the first year, and you would see that it would be 2 years, and you would start back again at the beginning of this cycle. Now, I think they actually start the cycle with a normal year, but the Jews do. It doesn't really matter where you start as far as how you're counting it. I like to do it like this. So tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone, tone. And then this would be from the 18th back to the first year. That'd be a semitone. And then tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So anybody who knows anything about music, that will make sense. For people who don't know about musical scales, that might not make sense. Now, the thing that you will see here is that we have 7 years that are leap years and 12 that are normal years. Now, what would be the significance of that, of 12 and 7?
Aren't those factors, I mean, together, they'd be factors of the 2520.
Oh, yes. So that's one thing. But we know 7 years is a number of
Completion.
well, it's the number of the week, right? And 12 is the number of the covenant.
It's also your 7 is also going to be the number of the years to the allowing the land to rest every 7th year.
Yeah, so a jubilee or sabbatical cycle is 7 years. So your week,
Correct.
whether it's days or years, is a cycle of 7. And now the 12 is also the number of months normally in a year. So,
Right.
and so if you looked at this, you could see this 19-year cycle as representing both a yearly cycle and a weekly cycle combined into one. Now,
We have a,
yeah,
yes, we have the 12-7 grouped together quite a lot in the Bible. For instance, at Elim, you have 12 wells and 70 palm trees. And then Christ sends out the 12 disciples, and then he sends out 70 disciples.
Mhm.
And various other places. We
Yeah,
find that
yeah. And we also used it as a symbol when it came to from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the 7th month, that from the first day of the first month to the first day of the 5th month was how many days?
prophetically 120.
Prophetically 120. And then from the first day of the 5th month to the 10th day of the 7th month was prophetically 70 days. So we had 120 and 70 to make 190 days. Just using 30-day months. Though in reality, there's 3 29-day months in there. But this idea of 120 representing, and who did the 120 represent? And the 70 represent? Where did we apply this?
The priests and Levites.
Yeah, and where did we get that from? Initially, where we were looking at
Chronicles.
Chronicles, 2 Chronicles chapter
29.
29.
29.
Yeah, 29 and 30. So these ideas were developed a number of years ago. And they were things that we noticed over time that we started to put together. Now, the Metonic cycle itself is just a natural cycle. Now, there was one person who really criticized it because it was discovered by a Greek, Meton, and it was a very silly argument, not really meaning to offend the person, but there's lots of things that Greeks have found out that are just natural cycles. So it's not like the Greeks invented it. Also, it was understood by the Jews long before that, and also by the Babylonians, because anytime you had a lunar-solar calendar, you're going to start to notice these cycles. It's just that Meton, wrote it out. And, so for the Greeks in our world, that's when we're going to first notice it, is when a Greek has done it. Nobody really cared about what the Babylonians or the Jews did, but the Romans did. And we come from a Roman society. So that's why. So it's nothing to do with, it's Greek philosophy or anything like that. It's just a natural cycle that somebody noticed. Now, we also know that a musical scale, there are 2 different types of musical scales. Well, there's probably a lot more, but the most common are what we call diatonic scales. So like a major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, has 7 letters in it. And then the 8th is the octave. And then a chromatic scale is all the tones that you would play That would be C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. There's no note in between E and F, so just go E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and then there's no note between B and C. So when you get back to C again, you've actually moved up 13 semitones or half steps. And so an octave is 8 and 13 is a chromatic octave. If you want to call it an octave, I guess it's whatever 13 would be in Greek. But anyway, what's the significance of the 8 and 13?
13 has a symbol of rebellion.
Okay, well, what about 8:13 itself?
Daniel 8:13.
Right, Palmoni, right? And we also know that 8:13 is then part of a Fibonacci series, right? 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, etc. You're just adding the previous one to it. So this idea of 8:13 existing in nature, existing as a Fibonacci sequence of numbers, and also that this exists within the Metonic cycle, it's showing that there is design. Now, some people might just say these are just accidental things that occurred, but I don't think so. I think that this is a design of the lunar solar calendar that God has set up, and so it has a purpose, prophetically and symbolically. Anybody have questions about this? I know people watching the video later on might have questions. And so if you have a question or something that you think I didn't make clear, if you ask the question, they're not going to be able to. And so if you ask the question, I can maybe answer it. And it might be their question as well. Anybody have any questions or any comments or observations?
There's actually quite a bit to this in the Metonic cycle.
Yeah, there's quite a bit, but this is just a very basic idea of it.
Well, the other point, and this is one of the things that I've looked at, is this being a 19-year cycle is also part as a symbol of the dividing of Israel.
Okay, and that's because that goes back to the 19 years between the 25-20 for
Implementations.
Yeah. So when you have in 742 BC is going to be 19 years until you have
Until Assyria takes northern Israel.
Hoshea is taken captive. And then you have 46 years until Manasseh is taken captive.
Correct.
And that's that 65-year period.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of things in there. Now, the other thing we can look at with this Metonic cycle is that it's of 235 months. That is, if you think about it and you realize that a year is 12 months, you have 12 years that have 12 months. So 12 times 12 is 144.
Right.
And then you have 7 years that have 13 months. Well, 7 times 13 is 91. And so you add 91 to 144 and you get 235 months. Right. So 235 months, it's just this number, but it's significant. It's the number of years from the dividing of the kingdom in 977 to 742 BC. So if you go to 742 BC, where we start the prophetic mirror, it's 235 years. So there's 235 years, and then there's 19 years that follow. So the 235 years are also represented as 235 months.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So this may seem kind of, benign, but I guess the question I have is, historically, why did they choose this cycle? 2 years, then 3 years, some of them back to 2 years. you know, was there any particular history or reason why they chose them
They
like
didn't,
this?
they didn't choose them. It's just a natural cycle. So when you're going to start the Jewish year, you're going to wait until the spring equinox. And
Right.
once you have the spring equinox begin, then you look for the new moon. And the first new moon after the spring equinox will begin a year. So what you're going to find, though, is some years you'll come to the end of the year on the 12th, the last day of the 12th month, and the spring equinox has not happened. So that means you can't start the next year yet. So you have to add a 13th month, and then you will start the next year a month later, right? So because it has to be after the spring equinox that you start the year. So what ends up happening is you just have every 2 or 3 years that you're going to add this extra month. And so those red ones there, those are the ones where there's an extra month added. And it's just the way the cycle works. I mean, you could start it in any place. You could start any one as the first year, but that cycle will still end up happening. You'll have, there's going to be 2 places in a 19-year period where there isn't 2 years in between. There's only 1 year in between, and they're going to be spaced out like this. Now,
This is just a natural cycle based on the movement of the sun, moon, and stars.
yeah, so it's just a lunar solar calendar produces this Metonic cycle. And now it's a pretty precise cycle, but it doesn't follow perfectly all the time. That is, when here, I'm going to switch my screen to the calculator here, just so you can see this. So what you have is 235 months. This is an easy way for me to do it. Times a month is 29.530594 days long. And you'll see that this is 6,939 plus 0.6859 or 959 days long. So it's not quite 6,940 days. So that means roughly every 4 Metonic cycles, if you were doing it as 6,940, you would be 1 day late. So you have to take out 1 day. So if I multiply this times 4, you'll see that I have this cycle of this many days, and then I can divide this by 29.530594.
You
And-
only did it by 9.
Oh, okay, times 9. Thanks for correcting me, and I have to divide this then, divided by 29.530594. And then what you'll see is there's a period of, well, it's 939 and almost a half months. So the cycle it's not exact. That's part of the problem with the cycle. I don't know, I might have made a mistake there. No, looks like I did it okay. But anyway, the point is the Metonic cycle is not exact. So you're going to find the odd time that that it has an extra day. So that you have to take that day out, or that year out. That year is going to be shifted over. No, it's hard to explain, but you're just going to have one leap year that's not going to be in that cycle. So it happens every so often. So not very often. I guess I'd have to figure it out how often it shifts. But it's a pretty precise cycle. Hopefully that helps a little bit answer your question. I don't want to go too deep into the math of it.
Certainly, it just that sometimes, you lay out numbers on paper and then your mind sometimes doesn't always relate that to the actual, cycle that is happening in our world, the sun, moon, and stars.
Yeah, and see, nowadays, of course, as I pointed out many times, we're not aware of the natural cycles that farmers are. I have a guitar student who's a farmer, and he's sort of noticed these cycles a little bit, but he uses the Farmer's Almanac and stuff. But he's really interested in this. My paper on the Molad interval, he's read it a few times, and he's looking more and more into understanding these calendars. So Dwight's going to put up his paper.
I'm going to put up some working notes.
Yeah, working notes, I guess, is what you would want to call them.
Yeah. So let's do one other first. Now, I've sent to a few this link to Wikipedia dealing with the Metonic cycle. And as we're going through this, I found it interesting to try to use this as a basis, but there's a lot of things that Theodore understands that maybe the people that authored this article don't understand. So it gives the history of the Metonic cycle, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the ancient Greek word. I would just murder it. That's the ancient Greek word for 19.
Yeah.
Is a period of approximately 19 years, after which the phases of the moon reoccur at the same time of the year. The reoccurrence is not perfect, but by precise observation, the Metonic cycle, defined as 235 synodic lunar months, is just 1 hour, 27 minutes, and 33 seconds longer than 19 tropical years. Meton of Athens in the 5th century BC judged the cycle to be a whole number of days, 6,940. Using these whole numbers facilitates the construction of a lunar-solar calendar. So what I observed and what Theodore was showing there just a moment ago, in the Babylonian and Hebrew lunisolar calendars, the years 3, 6, 8, 11, 14, 17, and 19 are the 13-month years of the Metonic cycle. Now, is this something that you have found to be precise, Theodore, or is this something that could be off?
Well, no, the thing is you can choose any place you want to start it.
Okay.
Right. So wherever you start, if you counted that as year 1, the cycle is going to shift. The point is there's going to be a grouping of where they're 3 apart, and that's going to happen twice. And then there will be a semitone, or where they're 2 apart, and then they will happen 3 apart, 3 apart, 3 apart, and then 2 apart. So where you start in that cycle and start the count, it doesn't really matter. It's just, and different groups who use the Metonic cycle start in different points. But if you look at what they have here, they have tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So they're going to start with the 0 year. That is, they're going to count, not like I did it. I had started with 1. They're going to start, they're going to start with 1, but they're going to have the 3rd instead of the 4th marked as an embolism, right? So they're going to start with 2 normal years, then an embolismic year, and then 2 normal years and an embolismic year, and then 1 normal year and an embolismic year, right? So they're just going to do the cycle there. So tone, 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 semitone, tone, 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 semitone, tone, 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 semitone, like a major scale. That's generally how it's done, but you don't have to start there.
Okay, well, the thing that I was looking at was a pattern.
Yeah, the pattern's correct.
Okay, so the pattern in this would bring us to 3, 3, 2, 3, 3, 3, 2.
Right, which I call tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. But yeah, 3, 3, 2, 3, 3, 3, 2. Yeah.
Okay. Now, as I went through this, now I've sent this link from Wikipedia I think a total of 4 people. But in this, I started looking at other years because the entire premise of what I had been looking at and studying was, could we line up portions of Millerite history and our history with the time of Christ?
And do the Metonic cycles line up?
Yes, do the Metonic cycles line up? And is there anything in this that we find that is strange about how these things are all being pulled together?
Mhm.
Now,
you were using a biblical calendar converted version 2, which is Troy Van Horn's a calendar converter to decide where the leap years are.
right,
And I just want to make a note on this. So if you looked at the rabbinic calendar, the leap years are going to be in different places. But also, Troy made some changes. He has a first version of his calendar converter and a second version of his calendar converter. And there are discrepancies when it comes to where he places the leap years.
okay,
He was doing some different math in his second version. Now, I've always used his first version because I couldn't figure out what he had done in his second version, and the first version always worked well. So I tend to use the first version. Dwight was using the second version. So can I just show them, people, this? I'll just switch the screen here.
there you go.
Sorry about that. So here is this calendar converter. I'll just show you what I mean. So if I go to 4 BC, a Julian year, and I'm going to go to the first day of the first month when the year starts. So that's the Jewish year starts. And you can see in 4 BC, it's going to start on April 11th. And that's the year Jesus was born, in the fall. And you'll see here it says 13 months.
Right,
So that means it's an embolismic year. That means that year is going to have 13 months. So when you go through this, and I go month by month and I count them, I'm going to go through 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Then there's going to be a 13th month added. Because if I didn't, the beginning of the year would have to start in February. Right?
Okay.
So it's going to start instead March 18th. And, pardon me, no, it would have to actually start March 18th, which would be before the spring equinox by about 5 days. And then, so Nisan 1 then ends up being on April 17th in 3 BC. And you can see this year is going to have 12 months. And then the next year will also have 12 months. And then I'm going to have a leap year again. And then I'm going to have a normal year. And then I'm going to have a leap year. So you can see when we're starting with the birth of Christ, it's going to go back to 4 BC. It's going to start with a leap year. And then it's going to go 3 years to a leap year, then 2 years to a leap year. So it's not starting at the beginning of this particular Metonic cycle that they mentioned in your notes.
right.
Hopefully that helps. So you can then share your paper there. But,
Okay.
and if anybody wants to have the link to this calendar converter who's watching the video, you can always email me at theodorejamesturner@gmail.com. And I can email you the link. You could also try searching for it. It's hard to find. You can also see it there. It's troyandrebecca.info/calendar converter, with both of them capitalized and all together as one word, no spaces. Then /version capitalized, either 1 or 2. So version 1 in this case. And then / and then calendar converter, all one word in lowercase, and then .html. So you could look for that. And Rebecca is spelled REBECA. So anyway, that's the link.
Okay,
Maybe I can add it in my notes too, or like on the YouTube page. I maybe should just put the link there for people.
I think that
Okay,
okay, so as I went through this, I went looking to see if we could line up things such as the Battle of Raphia, such as other points of church history with different years, Julian and Gregorian. Now, as I went through and began working this through, of course, we're all aware that the Lisbon earthquake took place on the 1st of November of 1755, and that day was a Sabbath. So it took place after the leap year of 1754. But I started noticing a strange pattern comparing the Gregorian years with the Julian years when I lined them up this way, that sometimes, like in the Julian, we would go, as Theodore was saying, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. And in the Gregorian, we would be tone, 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 semitone, and then tone, tone, semitone. Does that make sense? That is a little bit of a strange occurrence.
I don't get it.
You don't get it? Okay, like I'm looking here at 1757, 1759. Everything else is lining up with the other years over here in the Julian, but this span of Gregorian goes 333, so tone, 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 and over here in the Julian it went tone, tone, semitone, 332. Now, as I continued through this, we come to the next phase.
okay. So you started at 224 BC, right?
Correct.
Now, are you sure you just didn't line up the Julian and Gregorian years to start correctly? Right? That you didn't, that maybe you shouldn't start at 224 to get them lined up. That is, you needed to line up the Metonic cycles. Seems to me you didn't get them lined up.
What I did is I worked backwards on this one. I lined up a specific number of items during the life of Christ, and then I worked the rest of them back throughout this.
Okay. But if I go back to 224 BC,
Okay.
and I start working my way, I have to work my way forward, right? I'm going to count. I can't go backwards with the Metonic cycle. I have to go forward, right? Does that make sense? So you're lining up, they're both going forward, right? Just one's in the negative numbers and the other's in a positive number. And so if I'm going to start this Metonic cycle and I want it to be tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, or 332, 3332, I can't start at 224. But there's, okay, so if I go back here, I'm just going to go back to, so yeah, so the cycle is going to start in 220, using the Julian calendar, the year 228. That's going to be the first year of the cycle.
228 or 227?
Well, 228 is going to be a normal year, right? So that's going to be where I start with 1. And then 227 is going to be a normal year as well. So I have 227 as a normal year. Because I'm using the Julian calendar. Or not, it's not a normal year, pardon me, it's a leap year. Yeah, so 227 is a leap year. So that means I'd actually have to start back. Okay, so no, that doesn't make sense there. Yeah. So that's the end of the cycle. Okay, yeah, so actually I would start at 226. So 226 would be a normal year. And that's going to be the first year of the cycle.
So we've gone back. This is 226 BC.
Yeah. So 226 BC, and then I'm going to count 2 years, and 224 BC is going to be the third year of the cycle. So that's where you got that correct. Yeah, so this is correct. 227 is a leap year.
And
Yeah.
there'd be 3 years between 227 BC and 224.
Right?
Okay. There would then be 3 years between 224 and 221.
Yeah, so that's correct. And so that's going to be correct here. Yeah, so you got this set up properly on this
Okay.
one. But on the next one in 751, you're going to be going 3332.
So take a look at that.
Okay. So seven, yeah. So now I understand what you were doing there. So in 1751 AD, when I'm going to start the cycle, I'm
In
going
the
to,
Gregorian calendar.
yeah, it doesn't really matter Julian or Gregorian. It's just because we're really looking at the biblical calendar.
Right.
Okay. It's just that when you go Julian in the past, you're using, you don't have a 0 year. If you go Gregorian BC, you do. So you have to be careful there. But still, your leap years are going to be in the same spot. So if I go back, trying to figure where.
Right. Is there anything significant then why you've chosen 227 BC?
Well, originally what I was looking for was to see if the Battle of Raphia had occurred during a leap year.
Yeah. So that's why the 217 Battle of Raphia is in there, and it's going to be a normal year. Does that make sense, Stephen?
Yes, because you have the
The leap years mark.
this 219 BC and 216 BC is going to have a 13-month year.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I know it took me a while to figure out what he was doing, but and why he started there. I was looking at it wrong. But so when he goes back here to 751,
1751.
yeah, 1751. Now, the reason you're going back there is you want to look at the Lisbon earthquake, but that's going to be a different place within the cycle.
No, that part I'm aware of. There were just certain things that kept popping up that are going to become very evident once we get a little further down this cycle. The only reason I brought this up on the Lisbon earthquake is this is one of those events in biblical prophecy that we can tie to a direct historical event. It occurred on the 1st of November of 1755 in a normal year, not in a leap year.
Right.
But 1754 was an emblematic leap year.
Yeah. Yeah. Embolismic year. Yeah. And so, but so the 755 and 756, both of those are normal years.
That's correct.
Okay.
Where then we come down to 1757 and 1759. When I lined those up with 224 and the other years in that line, instead of it being tone, tone, semitone, it wound up tone, 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 semitone.
But you're just starting a different place in the cycle. So you'd need to line that up differently.
But there, as I went further down this cycle, there were so many others that lined up correctly. I had to ask if this wasn't, if there wasn't a different reason for this.
So this could be one of those places just where the cycle skips.
Okay,
That's possible. I'd have to go through the whole cycle.
okay, so,
Because what we're saying for people trying to understand this is that the Metonic cycle has the odd time, and it's very odd, where it's going to skip. That is, you're not going to have an embolismic year where you think you will. And
right,
so now here in this case, then, if I'm, because you got this cycle up from quite a ways, and those brackets are supposed to be what? Why did you put those brackets on in column K?
that shows a 19-year cycle.
Okay. So okay, so 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I'm trying to figure this. Okay. So yeah, so just the way you have it spaced out, it would have been easier if we had like spaces in there.
Okay,
So yeah, so 1751, and then I add 19 years. Then I go to 1770 is going to start the next cycle, right?
right,
19 years. And then 1789. Okay, I see how you're doing it, how you're doing the brackets. Okay. So each one of those brackets at the beginning, that starts this new cycle of tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone.
right,
But you don't have it lined up. So you got tone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone. Yeah, so I don't think you have your column on the left lined up properly because it's still always the same cycle. So you just need to shift that cycle over so that your semitones line up.
okay, let's go through the rest of this. If I have to make some adjustments, I'm more than willing to do so.
Yeah.
Now, as I went to the next cycle,
It shows up in a different spot.
yep,
Okay. I see what you're saying then. So, and then it goes back to where it was.
Yep.
And it stays where it was.
correct.
Okay, so that's peculiar. So that's something I'm gonna have to look at. Stephen's gonna have to look at, maybe Iran, whoever wants to look at it and try to figure out what's going on here.
Okay, now,
It's weird that it goes back.
uh-huh,
It's weird that it goes back to the cycle the way it was previously.
right,
Yeah, okay, so that's what you noticed. Now I understand. Okay,
okay, so in the leap year of 1773, which is 25 years prior to the Pope being taken captive,
yeah,
we have the event of Clement the 14th banning the Jesuits, and he does so on 21st of July of 1773.
okay,
This is noted in Great Controversy 1888 edition on page 305.3. We have the dark day of 1780, 19th May of 1780, occurring. But I was intrigued because from the time that Clement XIV bans the Jesuits to the point where the Pope is taken captive on February 15th, which is the fulfillment of Daniel 12:11, we have a total of 8,975 days. And I don't know if that has any import to us at this time or not. Now, the time at which the Pope was taken captive on February 15, 1798 was definitely part of the leap year of 1797. Here again, we have this pattern changing again.
Okay.
So when we go into the next series of this leap year, of this Metonic cycle, we again return to tone, 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 semitone, and then tone, tone, semitone.
Yeah.
1805 is an interesting year for me because that is the year that the Marine Corps had their first foreign battle against Islam for the United States. It was interesting that the issue with Islam began in 1800, began to escalate in 1803, and was completed in 1805, all of which were leap years.
Yeah. Okay, and now just one thing about that, the 8975,
Yes.
if you multiply it by 25,
Okay.
or divide it by 25, I mean,
Okay.
you get 359. So that was the number of days that Stephen used in his calculation that went from the Feast of First Fruits, or not Feast of First Fruits, Feast of Pentecost, I guess. Feast of Pentecost in 31 AD, 1844 years of 359 days. So that's
Okay.
years without the Jubilee. So it's just interesting because you were looking at that as being a period of 25 years,
Right.
right? Somewhere
Right.
we're talking about 25 years. Can't remember where that was, from 1773 to 1784, right?
1773 to 1798.
1798. Okay. So anyway, so just that it happens to be 359 times 25 is 8975 days. So whatever the significance of that is.
But that adds something to what we're dealing with in all of this chronology.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we're completing this next Metonic cycle, we come down to 1805, where the Marines have won their battle on the shores of Tripoli. So I found that, to me, that was of interest. Now, when I come to the next Metonic cycle, here again, instead of tone, tone, semitone, we go again, tone, tone, tone. But that tone in 1814 had a very major impact because that being the Battle of Plattsburgh on September 11, 1814, that William Miller was involved in. But when I compare it against the Julian span at that time, there again, it does go tone, tone, semitone. So I'm just looking at the pattern again, trying to figure out, where am I wrong in this pattern?
Yeah, because you would think it would be wrong every single time, not wrong sometimes and correct the other times.
Right.
That's odd.
Now, as we come down through here, of course, as we've studied our history, Father Miller came to his understanding of the importance of this with Bible chronology. And he references this Battle of Plattsburgh, and he references it quite directly for us to be able to make note of it. Is this some type of a waymark? I would have to think that it is.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I dealt with that because it's September 11th.
Right.
And so, and they're also going to have a September 11th in 1816, because that's when he's going to start his 2 years of study.
Okay.
So on September 11th, they have this preacher come in just before they're going to have a ball to celebrate the Battle of Lake Champlain. And then because of the conviction everyone receives, they decide not to have the ball. And so that's when Miller starts his study. So there's 2 September 11ths in there.
Okay. So we would have this.
Yeah, the ball canceled.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes this bracketed port of 1814, 1860, where we have tone, semitone, where it should be semitone, tone. It makes it very interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it does.
Okay. Now we come down here to the 5th of these Metonic cycles. In 1833, we have been able to place that the Feast of Trumpet, the Heavenly Feast of Trumpet, begins. And again, we're going tone, 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 semitone. But this is also where William Miller is granted his licenses to preach, right?
Yeah. Now, how do we start the Heavenly Feast of Trumpets in 1833?
Well, the Heavenly Feast of Trumpets was to be for 10 days, right?
Okay, I see. So you're just taking the 10 days. Okay.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Now we come down to 1843, and this is where I first came to my understanding of the Metonic cycle and its import with our history. You and I had this conversation several years ago because I was using the Metonic cycle to try to understand more of the importance of Bible history and setting my calendars by the Metonic cycle. And you'd said to me earlier, several years back, that the Metonic cycle was not completely exact.
Mhm.
Yet, when we look at this, 1833 being the beginning of the Feast of Heavenly Feast of Trumpets, and 1843 being the end of the Heavenly Feast of Trumpets, we also have the fulfillment of Daniel 12:12 occurring in 1843, which is the 1335, right?
Yeah.
So all of this is occurring in leap years. I believe we also had noted, was it not, that Islam, or that Islam itself was going to fall about 1838? Wasn't that part of Snow's letters? Or who was it that stated that this was going to happen as of August 11th, 1840?
Well, Lich.
Okay, so Lich, did he not come out with that in 1838?
Yeah.
Okay,
Now another thing, which when we deal with the leap year cycle and the prophetic mirror,
right,
that we have in 742 BC, 723 BC, 677 BC, 457 BC. in 508 AD, 538 AD. Let me see, no, 538, not 508, 538, 1798, 1844, and 1863. Each one of those years begin right after a leap year. That is, a 13th month has been added
right,
in each of those years. So 742 BC, the first day of the first month happens after a leap year. After it happens after a 13th month. And each of the years in the prophetic mirror, the 8 different dates that we have that mark the start and the end of the prophetic mirror and the prophetic periods and the divisions of these periods. So 538 dividing the two 1260s into a 25-20 year period, and the 220 from 677 to 457. So it gives us 8 years. And the fact that each one of those follows or occurs at the end of a leap year was significant as well. That doesn't really necessarily have to do with the Metonic cycle, because they don't all line up with the Metonic cycle, but they do line up with the embolismic years. So I don't know.
okay,
You remember that study?
I do.
Okay. And they line up so closely that they're within like a 24-hour period.
Right.
So they're very close. So that makes this something like astronomically huge number that's very unlikely to occur by chance. But you're saying that we're finding these leap years lining up with certain things.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, 1846, as we're aware, is the year that the whites were married and they accepted Sabbath, right?
I think so. I think that's the year.
Okay. Here again, we have this strange pattern again occurring in this next leap year, or this next, excuse me,
Metonic cycle.
Metonic cycle, where we go tone, 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 semitone. But we come down to 1860 being a leap year, where the Seventh-day Adventist name is selected, and we have the death of Ellen and James White's youngest son.
Right.
Now, in 1862, wasn't that when Mrs. White was first given the health message?
I've always thought of it as 1863.
Okay, I can be wrong.
That's what I understand. Now you're going to have the Civil War begin in
April of 1861.
April of 1861. And so that's going to be after a leap year.
Right,
And 1863 is also after a leap year.
right,
It's on the prophetic mirror. So if you look at the Jewish month, the first day of the first month in 1863, it follows a 13th month. And so that's why you have 1862 as a leap year,
right.
right? Because it's going to have its 13th month in 1863.
Correct.
Okay. So we see the semitone there. We see the tone and then 2 years.
Okay. We come down to 1865, and of course, that's the year where the war between the states ends. It ends on the 9th of April of 1865, 12th day of the first month.
You sure it's not the 9th of May?
I'm looking at when Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox.
Okay. Okay, because I always thought it ended May 9th. Because they say the Andrew Johnson's May 9th declaration in 1865 marks the end of the Civil War. But yeah, there is disagreements about, but It starts on, what is this? The ceasefire agreement goes from April 9th to November 6th. So yeah, you do have April 9th in there. So that's going to be, what they have is the Army of Northern Virginia, April 9th, 1865. That General Robert E. Lee, what does he do here?
He surrenders to Ulysses
basically.
Simpson Grant
Yeah,
at the Appomattox Courthouse, Appomattox, Virginia.
okay. So you do have this April 9th and the May 9th, which is the official end of the war.
It's a strange thing for me because I have a relative on my father's side that was proposed to by General Lee, and she turned him down.
Right.
So here in this Metonic cycle, 1871 and 1873 are out of order.
Yeah.
We come down to the next Metonic cycle, starting in 1884. 1890 and 92 are out of the cycle. And the following, we go and we have starting in 1903, but we come down to 1909. Now, the reason I have bolded 1909, that is 46 years after the Seventh-day Adventist Church officially began to be recognized as a church by the Seventh-day or by the United States government.
Yeah.
And I believe the 1909 General Conference session was the last session of Ellen White's life. It was when the daily was accepted by leadership.
Yeah. It's also the one where A.T. Jones does a speech,
Okay.
if I remember correctly.
But when I'm looking at that, especially with the acceptance of the daily by leadership, this was kind of a sad situation to have it occur exactly 46 years after the church was recognized as a church by the United States government.
Yeah, so 46 years after 1863.
I come down further, and we have a time period where, as we've gone through this, by 1939, World War II began in Europe. And for some reason, the Adventist Church had its support of Adolf Hitler.
Hmm.
1941, here again, this 3-2
Yeah.
is in a very odd area. But in 2 years after that, World War II begins with the United States involvement.
Okay.
(1955), 46 years after that, the acceptance of the daily, questions on doctrine, they begin the interviews. The three men representing the General Conference and Martin and Barnhouse.
Yeah, so you got Unruh, Froome, and who else?
Reed.
Reed. Okay. Yeah, and then 2 years later, it's Question on Doctrines is published.
Okay.
Seventh-day Adventists answer questions on doctrine.
Okay. Now, as I begin looking at this, as I had looked, starting with 1960.
Yeah, now you've gone through, starting way back in the history of Raffia.
Right.
Now you've moved all the way up to the birth of Christ,
correct.
going back to 17, to the history of the Lisbon earthquake, lining that up with Raffi, and now you're moving into the birth of Christ, lining up with our history.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, here again, we have a tone, 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 semitone. And I'm accepting that the birth of Christ occurred in 4 BC.
Yeah, which it did.
Okay,
He's baptized when he's about 34 years of age in 27 AD. He has to be born in
34 or 31.
when he's baptized in 27 AD, he's going to be about 30 years of age.
Okay,
27 plus 4 minus 1 is 30. So,
right. I ask only because you'd said 34.
oh, I did? Oh,
Yes,
yeah, so 27.
okay. So then the next, if we're accepting that he was about 12 years old roughly when he went to the Passover, I'm asking the question, is it possible that this could be the year where they had the Passover at the temple?
Well, if he is born in 4 BC and he's going to be 12 years old, you'd have to go to 9 AD
Okay,
for him being at the temple, right? And
okay,
then 9 plus 18, that's going to give you the 27 AD for his baptism.
okay. So this one I would have to take out.
Yeah.
Okay. Easy enough. Here again, in this lineup, we would again come tone, 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 semitone, coming down to 1995.
Okay.
Now, in 1998, Elder Jeff began preparing to give his presentations on Gideon.
Okay. So Jeff Arnold Pippinger.
Right. In 2001, I think the world knows what happened well enough there on September 11th.
We already had lined it up with his baptism.
Right. So my question is, since we had the first prophecy conference roughly in 2004, can we line that up with the wedding in Cana?
So why are you putting the wedding in Cana there? See,
First
he's
public,
baptized in 27. The wedding in Cana would be in 28, wouldn't it?
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just asking in this, in a symbolic method,
Okay.
could we line this up, the first prophecy conference with the wedding in Canaan?
I don't know. I don't know if I would line it up with the wedding in Cana.
Okay,
Is if I'm going to look at the baptism and I'm going to take the period of time as 3 years. So in the fall of 27, he's baptized. The wedding in Cana is in the spring of 28. So 30 AD is going to be, that's where, it's going to be in 30 AD where the woman caught in the act of adultery is brought before him.
right.
That's going to be in the fall there in 30 AD. But you're going to line up this with the first prophecy conference. So you want to have an event in 30 AD, wouldn't you?
Well, that it's entirely possible. I'm asking the what if, because I'm having to look at all this in more in a prophetic type of a resolution rather than a literal.
Okay.
Because by 2009, the 2520 again came in front of people. I know that 2012 was the controversy over Joel.
Yeah, now, yeah, so, but the 2520 was first presented by Jeff long before 2009.
Okay. Could
So,
it have been presented in 2006?
well, I remember in 2013, he was talking about 7 years. Because remember, there was, when did the disfellowship of occur regarding the people at Newport? Was that 2013?
2012.
That was 2012.
I'd have to go back because I do have the documents on my other computer.
So if you're going to go back 2012, Jeff had marked that as being 7 years.
It might have been 2013. I'd have
No,
to go
you're
back.
probably right. You're probably right. It's probably 2012. Uh,
2013.
it was?
Yep.
Okay.
So that would mean this could move up.
That was 2013.
Yeah, because I have the document that Bill Campbell submitted to the Newport Church, and it was dated January 31st, 2013.
Yeah, so there was a controversy going on in 2012. In December of 2012, Emiliano went to Germany. And then when he got back, like in 2013, you end up, well,
No, did he
but,
go to Germany or India?
no, he went to Germany in December of 2012.
Okay,
So I'm trying to figure this out.
because he had a time where he went to India, he came back, he was to give a presentation at Future for America. And he was so sick that he got word to Jeff that he had something for him regarding the book of Ezra.
So that's 2013.
Okay,
Yeah, because Jeff started this in 2012 and he was finishing off the Habakkuk's 2 tables in the spring of 2013. And,
because
and it was in 2013 that occurred.
when I talked with Elder Daniel, I asked him directly what he recalled as far as the time frame regarding the controversy over the book of Joel.
Yeah,
And he said that came to a head about 2012 because it was right after they had established things at the Lambert Church.
yeah. And in 2012, like February 15th, 2012,
Okay,
yeah, I think the disfellowshipping must have happened in 2012. Because I got a letter here in 2012. Man, I'm trying to remember all of this, what happened. So 2011, I went to, man, we should remember this much better. Because 2011, I was in in Oregon at the camp meeting where Ty Gibson shows up in September of 2012. No, that would be 2011, September 2011. So I think it must have happened the next year in 2012.
okay, I just opened up Bill's document.
Okay,
His date that he put in the document was February of 2012.
Okay, so it's February of 2012, and that's going to be 7 years from when they first presented the 2520, according to Jeff, when he
Okay.
does a presentation regarding Newport, right? So he's going to talk about Newport, and he's going to go Newport, where because in 1863, you have Newport is where they first distribute the 1863 charts,
Right.
right? And so then he connects that to Newport disfellowship. So that's 2012. That makes sense then. Because it was in 2011, Ty was there and searching this out. And then it was, you know, the next spring that you're going to have this disfellowshipping happening. Okay, so I know for people watching this, it's funny watching us work through some of this, trying to remember. But so the controversy over Joel, I mean, this continues into 2014.
Right.
That's when the split happens. So you're saying once that disfellowshipping happening at Newport in 2012, that you're going to have the controversy over Joel sort of come to the fore.
Right.
Because in 2010, it was already starting to brew the dissatisfaction with Jeff. But it definitely wasn't something that anybody saw.
Right.
Jeff knew about it. And then in 2012, they have this controversy, and they sort of create what they believe is an agreement that Jeff is not going to promote his view. They sort of force this on Jeff. And in 2014, Jeff is presenting his view, and then they decide, Jamal Sankey writes a letter, which I read in 2014, where basically they give all these false reports about Jeff.
Exactly.
So, okay. So, I mean, you could put 2014 in there because that's the first split.
Okay. All right. Now we come down to 2017 as being the next leap year. And that's where you, Stephen, and Odilio are presenting this regarding the 777, and then coming up with the date on December 25th of 2021.
Okay, so that's not going to be then in 2017.
Okay.
So in 2017, that is on September 23rd, I present for the first time July 18th as a symbol of the prediction before midnight at Lambert Church.
Okay.
The next year in 2018 that we discover November 9th. And it's in 2019 that Odilio, starting on April 26th, when I contacted him, I believe it was, or maybe it was March 27th, he contacted me. First time we talked. And there we're developing then, Stephen has already been doing that in 2018. But in 2019, Odilio and I talked for the first time. And so we're starting to understand July 18th and the 77 chiasm and December 25th. And that's mostly just Stephen who comes up with that December 25th and the 777 structure. So that's 2019. I mean, he does start it in 2018. Stephen, when did you first notice 777 days? I know Stephen must be there. So Stephen would know when he first found that out. He mustn't be listening right now.
Okay.
Okay, and then we have the destruction upon Nashville that's supposed to happen in 2020 and the division that happens in this movement.
Right. And so symbolically, I was asking the question, could we use that as the equivalent of John 6 verses 60 to 66.
Okay, now. And when you're lining that up, you're lining that up in 46 AD.
Again, all I'm looking at is I'm looking at the numbers here, going through our years
Yeah,
and looking at the pattern of the number of years, one to the next to the next,
yeah. So we have 46 AD
right?
lining up with 2020.
Right.
That's all I'm noting. So that's interesting. Yeah, it's definitely the hard saying. It's the division, John 6 verse 66. Well, there's some interesting ideas here. I mean, I'm going to have to go through this with a fine-tooth comb and try to figure out what's happening, why we're having these flipped around Metonic cycles, because those don't really happen. And either it's a mistake in his program or something's going on.
Well, here again, if I made the mistake, I stand ready to be corrected.
Mhm.
I keep looking at this and I'm looking at patterns and I'm seeing oddities in the patterns.
Yeah. So when you line these up, what years did you choose to line them up? Like, I mean, you use this history of Raphia, but were you to line them up in this way, it was just the Metonic cycle, but you're starting it with also Lisbon.
What I had done is I started with what I felt we would have as far as a history that we could understand.
Yeah.
So I was looking, starting here from 1998.
So you worked your way backwards?
I worked my way backwards. That's what I said at the outset.
Okay, yeah. But you worked your way backwards from 1998. Or did you line up 2001 with the baptism? Is that where you?
No, I was looking at the Metonic cycle patterns
Mhm.
and then looking at the years that they lined up with.
Yeah, but you have to start on what particular year?
1998,
Okay, why 1998?
because
Because 1998 lined up with the week of Christ.
correct.
So that means 2001 and 27 being the baptism. Those are really the ones you're lining up.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Okay,
Now here's the other oddity.
yeah,
And this is the thing that I've noticed, and I've seen this for years, but I've not been able to really give a good pinpoint of this. When I go back here to 1909, where the
Yeah.
daily was accepted, that's 46 years after the church was established.
yeah,
1955, when they began their conversations on questions on doctrine, was 46 years after 1909.
yeah. And then you got another 46 years to 2000.
Then I got the 46 years to 2001, and I did not put in there that this was the year that spiritual formation was accepted and required by all that were going to be trained as ministers, teachers, or administrators within the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yeah, so if we go all the way back to 1798 and we just keep following this cycle of 40, well, no, I guess we're going from 1863. counting
Correct.
6 years. And 1863 is 75 years. So 65 years from 1798. So it's just going from the end of the prophetic mirror and counting cycles of 46 years.
Right.
Okay.
So that's as far as I've taken this so far.
Okay. And then it's interesting that 2020 lines up with 46 AD.
Right.
Okay. That's just an accidental occurrence of this alignment, but it's a nice symbol.
So,
Okay. Well, I think that was really interesting. I mean, we're going to have to look at this a little bit more, but this becomes another one of those things where we can take patterns as I look back in past histories and start to line them up. Now, what we haven't lined them up, like you chose one history to line them up, but really we haven't looked at the Metonic cycles in all the different histories.
no, we haven't.
And there might be something there. Now, the problem with the Metonic cycle, as you see here, there's these ones that flip around, and I have to figure out why that happens. It doesn't,
Agreed.
it's whether that's an anomaly created by his calculation program, and that he's got some of his years, the leap years, in the wrong spot. Because that's generally just not how it's always consistent. So why that's happening, and you can see it's always consistent in the Julian ones, right?
It's very consistent in the Julian ones.
But in our Gregorian ones, we get them flipped around every couple of times.
Right.
And that's very odd. So either there's some mistake being made, or there's some reason why that's occurring, having to do with the closeness of where those, it could have something to do with the closeness of where those embolisms occur, and that they just happen to flip back and forth because they're so closely aligned with the equinox at that point in the Metonic cycle.
Okay.
That could be the possibility. So I'm gonna have to look in that. Well, I appreciate that, Dwight. I know we put some people asleep. It's not the most exciting video from somebody watching it, but this does show some of the things that we do when we work through something, and other people can take this up. I mean, if you use the calendar converter, it'd be really nice if somebody who watches this video online, sort of notices something or catches something that we haven't seen and puts it together. That would be to me, that'd be quite exciting. So I give that as a challenge to whoever the Holy Spirit inspires to do further work on this.
Okay.
And we'll continue doing work on this, but there may be things that we just miss. Okay, well, let's, do you want to offer prayer?
Sure. Gracious Father in heaven, we thank you for this time that we've been able to spend together. We thank you for the time that we've been able to puzzle so many of these things, to be able to consider that which you are trying to show us. Father, again, we bring Elder Daniel's son before you. We ask, Father, for grace. We ask for your blessing for Elder Daniel's family, for his son. We ask for your guidance and your direction in this situation and in many others. Be with us now for the balance of this day. Help us so that as we go forward in this day, we may be able to more properly represent your character in all things and in all ways. For this, we thank you. For this, Father, we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.